everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Heather and I am a STEM Outreach and Public Engagement intern in the Faculty of Science and Engineering at the University of Wolverhampton, and I'm also a member of the STEM Response team. And today in this study skills session we'll be exploring understanding and answering exam questions. So firstly, understanding and answering exam questions starts long before the actual exam itself. So there's a few key things that you need to go through and understand before the exam. And the first is reading and knowing the syllabus. And this may seem a little bit straightforward, but it's vital that you understand the whole syllabus that the subject is on, so you know which topics may arise in the exam, so you know you can revise these topics and plan your revision sessions to make sure you cover all bases needed ready for your exam. It is also important that you think a little bit like an examiner, for example, and that it might be a bit odd to say, but if you think what an examiner is looking for when they come to mark an exam question, this will help you plan your answers to these questions. So it'll be things such as like, have you actually answered the question? Have you included key terms? Have you included definitions? Have you supported your answer with maybe evidence? All things such as this will help you plan and be ready for your exam. And finally, it's knowing the rules of your exam. So of course you will know the time, date and location of your exam, but it's also important that you know the other aspects of your exam also, like what kind of questions will be asked in your exam. Will they be multiple choice questions? Will they be short answer questions, long answer questions, or will they be a essay style question? And then with these questions, do you have to answer all of those? Do you have to answer some sections but not others? Or are there some questions that are compulsory and then some you get to choose yourself? Or do you get to choose any of the questions in the exam that you can do? So all of these things are items which you need to understand before your exam, and this will really help your revision and preparation for the exam for when that time comes around. So what you need to do to show the examiner that you have understood and answered the question is make sure you're able to define the key terms. You make your point clear and you don't carry on and drag out the answer essentially without there any need to be the answer. Just because you write a long answer doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be any better than a short answer that's more precise. Be persuasive in your arguments, especially if you're writing an essay style question where you're giving two basically sides of a view, as this will lead and help you in your conclusion. Make sure you back up any points that you have with evidence. Again, keep to the points and don't go on and on when it's not needed, or basically you need to just stick to the points and answer the question and be as clear and concise as possible. And most importantly, make sure that you're actually answering the question that's being asked. So where do students usually fail? And there's three main areas really which students end up losing marks in the exam. The first being not answering the question. So sometimes we can get a little ahead of ourselves and we can see keywords in the question and we kind of jump the gun a little bit and start writing the answer based on these key terms, whereas the actual whole question is asking something different. This not only is a waste of your time in the exam, but also could lead to you missing marks if you don't go back and reread that question and understand what it's actually asking of you. Not understanding your key terms is another one where students end up losing marks, and that is important, and that's why that's something that you need to go through your syllabus and read and see the key points. And there's also not writing in the correct format. And this depends on the exam that you're doing, as more exams ask for a specific format of writing and writing style, whereas others don't. So again, this is a piece of information that you need to know before your exam to make sure you don't lose marks on a simple concept such as the correct format. So before your exam, it is really important that you have a look at past exam papers and you have a go at doing past exam papers yourself. So firstly, of course, you need to know your exam board, and these can be things such as AQA, OCR and Edexcel and other ones listed here. So if you just go on their website and you click whether you're GCSE or A level and click the topic, it will give you all the past exam papers over the last 3 or 4 years and also the mark screen. Doing these exam papers will give you a chance to practice the exam essentially, so you can time yourself like the time you are given in the exam, and you can have a go at completing the questions in exam conditions and see how you get on. And of course, as you get access to the mark scheme, you can either mark it yourself or you can get somebody else to mark it for you. So you can see what kind of areas of the exam that you do better on, what areas you do not as good on. So there you have room to improve, and this is where you can focus your revision on, ready for your exam. This will also highlight if there's any areas or topics where you think you're okay and you're good and ready to go for the exam, but maybe you don't quite hit the mark scheme in terms of your answers. Because I know with a lot of mark schemes, even though you may be right in the general gist of your answer, if you don't mention key words or key terms, you fail to get that mark. So it's really with understanding what the question is asking and what kind of answer they are wanting from you to make sure you get as much marks as possible. So this one is really important, and we touched it a little bit on earlier, and that is reading the question. As I said, sometimes when we open an exam, we're feeling a bit nervous because we're doing the exam and we want to do well. And sometimes we get a bit of ahead of ourselves and we start answering the question because we've noticed a couple of key terms about a subject or topic that we are knowledgeable on. So we start writing our answer without actually reading the question and understanding exactly what the question is wanting from us. So it's best to read the question slowly and carefully. You can highlight or underline any key points that the question is asking of you to answer. Focus on things such as the verbs and the concepts. So is it saying like state or define or discuss, as this will help you structure your answer. And also the concept will allow you to think of what information should be included in your answer. And finally, read the question again. Because even though we've read it slowly and carefully the first time, because we have those kind of the anxiety levels and we're a bit stressed and we're a bit worried because we're doing the exam, we may not have still read the exam question properly. So the more times you read it, it kind of sinks into your head a little bit deeper, and you're able to think actually how you could answer this question. Another important one is managing your time in the exam. Of course, all exams have different timings, so this is something that you need to find out before the exam so you can plan how you'll tackle the exam when you get in there. And by plan, I mean how much time you're going to allocate per question. So this is easier to do in the exam where, for example, you have a couple of essays that all have the same marks. You can break the essays down into segments of time that you have to complete these. But it's a bit more harder to do if you're doing an exam that's maybe combined of short or long question answers, so you're not quite sure. But it's best to plan to allow time for you to read your questions, to answer them, and also at the end of the exam to go back through all of your questions and to read them. Now, when I say reading time, it is kind of up to you as an individual how you plan to tackle this. You can either read the question and then think about it, then answer it, then move on to the next one, and so forth and so forth. Or you can read through all the questions first and then go back to the first question and start answering it. The second approach works well because you read through all the questions and you kind of subconsciously start thinking about the answers and all the information you need to answer these. However, some people prefer to just tackle each question as they come. So as long as you read the question and you read it slowly and you're understanding what the question's asking of you, you do completely what works best for you. And doing exam papers, the past exam papers, is what will help you figure out which kind of process works best for you. Allowing for checking time is really important, and this is just to make sure that you've answered all your questions and you haven't missed out anything important. So structuring your answer. Now, this obviously isn't really important in terms of multiple choice answer exam questions or possibly even short answer questions. This is more so for long and essay based. So essentially you almost are telling a story. You start with a beginning, a middle and an end. And with this is how you structure your story of the points that you want to include. So the beginning will essentially be like your introduction possibly. Your middle will consist of paragraphs of answering the question itself, and sometimes this can be a kind of a to and fro kind of situation. So you have some paragraphs supporting what the question is saying and some paragraphs disputing what the question is saying, and then you end with your conclusion of which one you agree with or which one you think is right. So there's a couple of methods that you can use to answer your exam questions, and one is the advocate method, and this is by stating what you think and explaining why you think this. Or you also have the jury method, which is building up to a conclusion through supporting evidence and providing evidence of why you think a certain way. So when you do your practice exam papers, you can try out both of these methods and you can see what fits best not only for you, but also for the exam itself and what kind of questions asking and what answer it is looking for. And finally, reading back through your answers is really important at the end of your exam. And I don't mean going back through every question, reading it again and like scribbling out your answer and starting it again. I mean just going back through your questions and making sure your handwriting is legible so it'll be easy for the examiner to read, because if they can't read it, they can't mark it, so you may lose marks here. It is important to read to make sure that there's no spelling mistakes or grammar errors that you can easily fix. And it's good just to read back through questions to make sure that you have shown your understanding and that you've answered the question, as sometimes when you're answering a question you might not know exactly what to say, so you might write something, but as you're continuing throughout the exam you might have an idea that pops up that you can add back to it later. So it's good to allow you time at the end of the exam to go back through your questions to just see if there's any more information or any more points you can add to your question that you missed beforehand. So the main important advice I can give you here for answering and understanding exam questions is, in the time leading up to your exam, make sure that you prep and you do revision and you understand all the topics that may be brought up in the exam, so you might have to answer. In the exam yourself, you remain as calm as you possibly can and take your time with reading the questions and planning your answers and structuring your answers. And of course, leaving time for yourselves at the end to go through all of your answers to make sure you haven't made any silly mistakes that you've done simply because you were a bit nervous or you're rushing through. So I hope you all have enjoyed this study skills session on understanding and answering exam questions. There is some more fabulous content coming in the rest of this topic, so stay tuned for that. Thank you. Bye bye.